could you please pronounce your name correctly for me?
Yeah, my name is Aleš Bravničar. I'm born in Slovenia, and in these parts of the world, we have some funny little things on our letters. Ch, sh, zh. It's quite difficult to say them for some people. So this is exactly how my name sounds.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. I'm horrible with languages, and so those little accents are difficult. But I did recently find out that my name is supposed to have an umlaut over it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. That must be some German ancestry or something from the old country, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I did my family lineage, and we found out that my great grandfather had named Doles had an umlaut over the O before he immigrated.
Oh, that's awesome. Just checking back, and you can see where your ancestors are without rubbing your nose or tongue in those swabs of DNA.
Well, I'm thinking about doing actually putting the umlaut back in. I'm like,
Okay.
Why not?
Okay.
Own it.
It's a statement for sure.
It is indeed. Well, my wife is Czech now, so I could embrace the cultural thing in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So when it comes to your work, though, because we're here to talk about you, how did you get started? I mean, you're now a very prominent photographer, videographer. You do lots of different sort of things in the image and moving image field. But how did you get started? Were your parents creative? Did you have some great teachers in school? Like, what was the path to finding this career?
Well, I started trotting on this path of photography just, by myself, and I am schooled by experience. I have not been to any photography school. I've been to faculty for social sciences, studying communication, but I am self-taught. I got bitten by the photography bug at 11 when my father, took out his shiny chrome 1938 Leica. And, it was like we were living in the world of compact cameras then. Every household had a little camera that was as easy to use as possible. And the pictures were really bad, really shitty. And, when I saw that thing from my dad, it was his camera. I was just stunned, I was smitten. It was a very complicated process to get that thing to work, especially when you're a kid who used to just press the button on a compact camera at 11. So, you had to take out the lens and lock it. Then you had to take it out of the little leather bag and, put the film in. And then you had to use a rangefinder to see what you were getting. You had no depth of field preview. You had no, through the lens metering or anything. It was probably the toughest way next to the large format camera with bellows to start shooting, but it was something that kickstarted my photography career, in fact. And 7 years later, 10 years later, I started working at our biggest publishing house, always being shooting. And, back in those days, it was like when you shot a roll of film, you had it developed, and it took like 2 weeks to have it developed and, have the prints. And my dad would always take the film to the developers, and then we would have to check every picture if it was worthy of enlarging or not. Because, you never know what a little kid shoots. It was then about a decade later that I started working professionally, being a part of an editorial staff for a teenager magazine. It was awesome. It was a great team, a great collective. And being in-house has opened a lot of doors for me for other publications, because editorial photography was still a huge thing back then. I was doing like 6 or 7 magazines per month, fashion mostly, and portraits, which was kind of the direction I wanted to go. So since then, it was more than 300 covers, tons of fashion editorials, travel stories as well, like for National Geographic Traveler and stuff, in-flight magazines, also Cosmopolitan, Elle, Grazia, Maxim, FHM, and of course Playboy, which was a part of my career for about almost 20 years, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
I'm incredibly envious that your first camera was a Leica. I mean, my first camera was a medium format Yashica D.
Oh, well, it's still great. It's still the basics of loading film and shooting without a light meter and, focusing by hand, adjusting f-stop and shutter speed. That is where you learn the basics of photography. And then later comes composing, and later comes telling stories. But the gist of photography, the painting with light and capturing that light correctly on the camera is something you need to do through trial and error for sure.
Well, I personally feel like most young photographers should take some time with medium format and large format cameras because of the flipped upside down and reverse left to right nature of forcing you to really think about composition versus the modern digital cameras, which are just sort of very easy and don't sort of encourage you to really think and see and learn as much.
Absolutely. The large format with your mentioned upside down flip focusing screen is the best tool for learning the process of composition as well, and you have 2 exposures per box. You have to be really careful what you do and then expose it. And this is how photography should be. But now we just have like millions of useless photographs because it's super easy to press a button and just, you delete it later or you keep it. But is this really different to before when all those useless photographs were kept in a shoebox? I don't think so, because the really bad ones get deleted anyway, and your discs are being the new shoeboxes under the bed now.
They are. I mean, I'm a horrible collector. I refuse to delete or even throw away bad photos. Like, I will keep everything, but I know lots of photographers that delete files and throw away shoeboxes and stuff, which to a certain extent I feel is kind of sad because, like, I've had conversations with people about the idea of legacy planning, sort of like the future of our legacies, basically, and how a lot of those people need to research basically our mistakes or things that didn't work for us. And so, like, in order to create a legacy for us, we need to keep that extra stuff. And so if we throw away or delete all these things, then we're leaving less for the future scholars to research us.
We are, but then again, the huge amount of photographs that is being taken, not only by photographers, but also, from webcams and, from this and that, it's going to leave a massive documentation of time, unlike anything before in history and all the videos and whatnot. So I think it's a good thing, but also a bad thing because eventually in 2009 or thereabouts, the photography market, just like a lot of other markets, craft markets and music markets, crashed because the supply just went so much over the demand. It's a good thing now that everybody can be a photographer, everybody can do photography like as a hobby for cheap, and a lot of old school photographers are very angry. I'm a pioneer photographer with a smartphone, and a lot of my colleagues are bitching about it, like, that's not real photography. But I couldn't disagree more, because it's a path and a direction where everything is eventually going when phones will become good enough for everything. And this computational photography will be indistinguishable from regular photography, regular digital photography. It's going to be just smartphones, always a camera in your pocket, always the best one because it's there. As they say, the best camera is the one you have on you. I can't wait. I am being burdened by the weight and the equipment, every camera being its own universe with menus. I use 4 systems at the moment. Of course, my main one is the legacy one from my childhood. It's not always easy to, concentrate on the job and then also concentrate on the perimeters of the camera, which varies from one make to the other. And I guess it's kind of a mixed evil. I need a medium format camera which has a completely different user interface and user experience to my little rangefinder camera, etc., etc. I guess it's one of the additional things you have to think about when doing work. How to tamper with your camera and how to conquer your camera to have a smooth workflow.
Agreed. I mean, I stopped taking pictures about, I don't know, 5 years ago because to a certain extent, I felt like there's just too much in the world that I don't know what more I have to offer. I mean, that nature of like, with Instagram and cell phone cameras and all this, like there's such a proliferation of photographs in the world in a way that's never existed before, that it's sort of like, how do you find something really new and different and unique and something that will grab people's attention and their interest, because there is such a sheer volume of stuff in the world?
That is absolutely correct. And I've been teaching photography for 7 years. We've been we had workshops all around the world, from Bali to Namibia, from Miami to Greece. And the first thing I said to my students was, you need to find a niche. You need to find something that will make you stand out in this flood of complete, oversaturation on the market. So you can be super successful and super unique, but you need to find your niche and you need to find your style that's going to show exactly how you put yourself into those images. So every time somebody will take a look and check, they will say, oh, it's that guy. I recognize him immediately from his pictures. And it took me about 20 years to develop my style through trial and error and through, inspiration and through checking other photographers and other artists as well, from Peter Lindbergh to Rembrandt. It's awesome because every little part of what we know and what we see enters our perception and then makes our vision and shapes our vision in a certain way. So I think it's super important to develop your style, and in this enormous market, as I said before, to develop a niche, which will, you don't have to do it forcibly, but if you succeed in that, you're going to be super, super successful. And especially with the Gen Z crowd, you're going to stand out.
Well, that niche thing and the style thing, I mean, I'm a bit of an outlier on this, but like sometimes I feel like it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it's magnificent. It can give you great success and all this, but after a while, it's gonna get boring to do it the same niche thing in the same style. And I'm easily bored. So for me, that's just like death to me. So that I'm constantly changing and evolving. And I feel like it's not just necessarily, because in the old days, it was very much that, like, get a style and it's very recognizable. And therefore, like, anybody who's going to hire you or buy your work is going to go like, oh, that's the iconic style and look of a photographer. But I feel like these days there's a bit more of a underlying sort of maybe a concept that needs to be the thing, instead of necessarily a visual style, because I feel like there's the need with the speed and the quantity of photography being produced to be showing an evolution and a growth of your style and your work, rather than necessarily find a single thing and stay with that for the rest of your career. Do you feel that way?
Well, yes and no. I think it's still a thing of, personal expression, to how much you put yourself in the pictures. So they are successful, in a way of your mind and what you know. That's like everything is rooted in one or several ideas we have in our heads about life and the philosophy on life and everything, and how we see art and whatnot. But I agree with the part where repeating one thing all the time becomes boring. Absolutely. And that's why every photographer needs to be a chameleon and reinvent himself or herself at some point to try something new. Because if you're going to just play the same trumpet all the time with the same tune, it is going to be boring eventually. You're going to be a one-hit wonder like a lot of musicians and whatnot. It's a process. It's a growth process in life as well, an evolution of your photography. And it has nothing to do with the equipment that you use or nothing to do with, things you do in life. It just has to stem from you, from the inside.
Well, see, and that's the thing that I think a lot of artists in general, but also specifically photographers, sort of fixate on. They think that when use like the words niche and style are thrown out, they believe that that means like a technique or an equipment or a lighting style or something like this. Something that basically I find is the wrong thing to be thinking of, because all of that stuff is basically repeatable by anybody else. So like if you're quote unquote style is like a lighting technique, let's say, well, any other photographer can steal that lighting technique. So that is nothing unique to you. So like, it's not about equipment. It's not about even the subject matter. It's about like the way you approach it and the way you interpret it and the way you address it and things like this. And I think that's a misunderstanding that a lot of young artists and photographers sort of, they think it's about materials and equipment, but it's really not.
Absolutely. And, I have my lighting guide out. It's like written word by word how to light. So every f-stop, every setting of the light, the power of the lights, the modifiers used, everything you put in a picture that looks great. But still, even though I give all those settings on a silver platter, 95% of people will never be able to do the same photo with all the intel as I did. Like, that's really funny. And that's really interesting, a phenomenon I've been studying lately. How, even though a lot of photographers now are giving away their like secrets, industry secrets. I love that word industry because it's stupid and funny and cool at the same time. The industry, it's like, like a big monster that's lurking and on the prowl for you and waiting for to embrace you. But it's just,
I find the word secret funnier, but yeah.
Yeah. It was mostly a very toxic thing, the industry. There was a lot of bad stuff going on in that industry, just like I guess in any industry, and it used to suck you up and chew you and spit you out. The problem with the industry is it has changed enormously as well. It's very individualized now. It's like micro managed for certain needs. So if I were a art director in an agency, I would call somebody that only does, bread photos, which are really artistic. If I wanted to convey a message about a new type of sourdough bread that's coming to the market to appeal to those audiences who follow those hashtags on Instagram, for instance. Before, you just used a photographer that does everything, still life related for a shoot, for a food product shot. But now it's also micromanaged in that way that the agencies take photographers that are really, doing something out of the ordinary to shoot, and they are then advertising it with influencers on a micro level, which don't have a lot of followers, but have a full-on engagement for that subject. So the marketing I studied has changed completely, as has the photography I have not studied, but learned by myself. The biggest problem of today that I see, it's so much average stuff out there. The average is the winner, because people don't have more than 5 seconds to consume. They go ahead and just flip. It has to capture you. Every video you make has to capture you in a few seconds. Otherwise, it's lost to the flood of information that's available online today. If you turn on the TV, if you go through the newspapers, there's very little need for perfection in the world of mass consumerism. And that's why some of us creative people are still fighting this average approach to photography, like averageness, because we need something that gives us motivation. We need challenges. And we are a little bit masochist in that way, I guess. But I'm still lingering to that idea that, if I try harder, the results are going to be better. Regardless, if I could have gotten away with something easier, I will not do it. I will try harder.
Yeah, I'm always saddened when I see news, like so photojournalism and things like this, and it's just like a cell phone photo by somebody who was just there, or a cell phone video, or even like quote unquote news that's being published like from Twitter accounts or Instagram accounts. And I'm just like, what happened to like that high quality level? I mean, the amount of mediocrity is ridiculous. And like things like, I keep hearing words like it's good enough. And that just drives me fucking nuts, because I mean, why strive for a life that's good enough? Like when I get up in the morning, I don't go, hey, you know what I want today? I want a good enough day. Like I want a spectacular day. I want to make amazing imagery. I want to really push my limits and push other people's expectations of me. There's such a sense of just, acceptance of mediocrity, and it's very disheartening for me. And maybe it's a generational thing. I think we're approximately the same age.
Yeah, there has been a huge shift, even with millennials and now especially with Gen Z. What is perfection and how it's treated? Because, it's the flood of content plus the multitasking of the new generation, which they can do several things at once, but once they sit down and try to read a book, they can't concentrate anymore. That's also another way of looking. So imagine a video online. As I said, if it doesn't capture your attention in a few seconds, you switch it off, you skip it, it's gone. Averageness and imperfection is sometimes now even a formula for success, because a lot of YouTubers deliberately insert some mistakes into their videos so people can then chew on that bone and just talk about it, and they make their engagement larger. Plus, they constantly and firmly nerve the audience with some things they say. So people bitch and people talk, but they do talk. So, old school producers and old school, we're not very old school. I'm Generation X, but, there's like baby boomers who are like, oh my God, what's going on? But it is a formula for success, because, engagement is there, and engagement is king these days for marketing, especially, active audience that then wants an update after it pours the anger on that mistake that was deliberately made, and their own opinion in the comments. You can say something finally, it's awesome. And the old school producers, as I was saying, and editors are angry because, you cannot form a recipe for content like that. It has to be spontaneous and it has to be improvised. You cannot put it into a marketing, just like the generations, the baby boomers, the Generation X, the millennials, the Generation Z, etc. It's all a marketing thing. It is impossible to draft a marketing scenario for something spontaneous, which will have like imperfection inside, which will have something that will nerve the audience and whatnot. And that's what gives the content individuality. And I think this individuality is key to audience engagement and is key to success if we look at the video.
The word relatability keeps getting thrown at me, and how people, they don't want to see images of quote unquote like perfection, because a lot of us can't relate to it. I mean, if you look to, I don't know, Victoria's Secret or Playboy, which you've done, like it gave off a false sense of, body disfigurement for women. There's the nature of like editorial stuff, where it used to be very much about like create a world that people would aspire to, whereas now it's more of create a world that people can actually attain and relate to. And so the direction of imagery itself has very much changed.
Paradigm shift. So, as with Playboy, it is going to be a hot topic now, because, billions of women are responding to their inner call to wake up and, become equal member of the society away from the toxic masculinity and this very male-oriented world, which Playboy was also part of since the 50s, was telling them to stay at home and be housewives. And it couldn't be further from their wishes because, absolutely the fight for the equality and the fight for, putting away the toxic masculinity is a big one. There is also a toxic femininity, you have to go hand in hand. The last decade has seen, especially last few years, is a crazy change in perception. And one of the biggest changes can be seen in men's magazines, in fact, because fewer and fewer men are turning to men's magazines for guidance of their role, how to dress, how to do things at workplace, how to do hobbies. It's funny that all those editorial strategies that have been there since the war have become completely unrecognizable in the past few years. Playboy has at some point decided, and it was a good decision, that appealing primarily to men is no longer the best way forward. And they changed from, entertainment for men to entertainment for all. They started putting men in fishnet nylons in there. They started to cater to queer communities. They started to, publish different things. At some point, they even abolished nudity because they thought it's going to help with marketing. But that was a tough move because the legacy of so many years with nudity was too grand. They had to put that back at some point. But, Playboy is now digital only, traveled far from Hugh Hefner's original conceptions. It has fallen a lot, The last printed issue was from 7 million monthly copies at its peak in the 70s to 500,000 copies per issue. So it was a logical thing to decide, and with the abolishment of press as well. And they cited Corona as the reason to go online, digital only. What was the post-war economic boom that would allow Playboy to reach that huge audience? And, the sex lib of the 70s is completely upside down now. And it's no longer worth to celebrate a heterosexual male, according to Playboy. And it's a logical thing, in this day and age.
Well, I'm interested in the way that whole kinds of loss of editorial and all this kind of stuff is then sort of trickling down to affect the photographers. Because in the old days, I know that they would give you a huge budget, a travel budget, your pickup models, lots of money and locations and all this kind of stuff, and time to do the shoots and all this. And these days, of course, everything is about speed and efficiency and all this. And of course, they're also not paying photographers anywhere near the amount of money that they used to pay, because in the old days, it was a worldwide rights and all this kind of jazz. And now it's just online rights. And by the fact that they simply have to produce a larger quantity of it, because it's expected more often than once a month, the quality and the amount of money invested, and then therefore the amount of money earned and the amount of quality images made by photographers is then also going down as well. And I'm concerned about the fact that the industry as a whole, a lot of photographers are having to, while they want to be niche, they have to diversify in order to continue to make a living, because no single thing, let's say we're just shooting for Playboy, will sustain you these days.
No, not only that, what happened was even worse than you could imagine. So
do tell.
At some point when they were starting to sell out franchises, Playboy was always about franchises. You'd have to pay and you'd have a franchise in your country. So anybody could buy a franchise for any country. At some point, people who bought the franchises realized they have no money to pay photographers. And they said, oh, let us do something different. Let us charge photographers and models. Let's change the business model to, anybody can be published in Playboy, several editions, of course, not the US and most European ones. Several editions did that. So if you want to be published in Playboy, you got to pay. You got to pay for the cover and you got to pay for the pictorial inside. So it was like, whoa. And at first it was illegal. Playboy didn't allow it, but they were still doing it. Later on, it was very open and, it attracted a slightly different crowd to what Hugh Hefner was publishing back then to those magazines. But I think it's still going on. Playboy has cut lots of international issues, a lot. I think there's only 2 left in Europe, regular ones. They never succumb to that. But some editions are, like all about you pay, we publish. And it's really funny, the change of the business model that has, I cannot say if it's bad or good, but it most definitely says something about the quality, not going through a filter of editors and, CEOs and whatnot. It just, here's my money, publish it. That's a huge difference to what it was about 10 years ago.
Again, that sort of just relates back to mediocrity. Like, I mean, I feel like a lot of that sort of breakdown of lack of editors and lack of sort of decision makers, taste makers, things like this is making it so that like the entire sort of industry-wide idea of like standards is really being diminished, because I mean, anybody could have a blog, anybody could have a podcast, anybody could have a YouTube channel. While the democratization is fabulous, because I mean, I wouldn't exist without it, and or at least this podcast wouldn't exist without it. But on the flip side of it, I feel like it's a bit damaging to a lot of industries and a lot of jobs, because like you used to get paid very well, I'm sure, to do a lot of these editorial shoots, whereas now you can't get paid. They just aren't going to pay that.
Absolutely. And, I left voluntarily. I left Playboy a few years ago, and then it folded all over Europe. I found my way of, producing the pictorials because, today photographers have to be producers and, directors and managers. And then they have to be like psychiatrists and boyfriends to the girls they shoot almost. And they have to be like, very, very good leaders and everything. They have to have Photoshop skills, marketing skills, editing skills, and at the end, still the shooting skills. We managed to get along. I managed to produce more than 40 or 50, I don't remember, international shoots all around the world, from Brazil to, Africa, from Southeast Asia to far parts of Europe to Ireland, because, it was something I loved doing. When Playboy stopped going around and, sending us around, I said, wow, I want to continue doing that. And, I found a way. I found my business model to still do that. The problem is, at some point, it was just, on the verge of, oh, I can't do this anymore. My work is much more cherished and must be, properly compensated. It was just impossible because there was not a lot of money at the editor's desk. It was a natural thing for me to leave. Plus, at some moment, I quit believing shooting for men magazines is still okay in my world, in my little universe. So, I still support women that want to be shot nude, and we still do it. I would not do it now for a magazine anymore and whatnot. Just, if somebody has individual wishes, we do it. There's a lot of OnlyFans now. There's a lot of Patreon sites where girls can also be their own publishers and have their own little Playboys, and mostly are more successful. Some are more successful than if they were just to appear in Playboy, for instance, or any girl's magazine. But the stigma of those sites like OnlyFans is everybody think it's just porn. It's luckily not. OnlyFans is really trying to clean the slate and be like more for like publishing artists, musicians, like script writers, cooks, and whatnot. The pandemics has spawned a lot of, passive income for a lot of girls doing a lot of nasty stuff on OnlyFans. So it's a bit stigmatized. It's not easy for a lot of girls to go and be there because everybody thinks it's porn. It's not porn. always. Some girls just want to do an uncensored version of their own Instagram there, but get like eaten by the public opinion that it's nastiness. It's not nastiness. It's whatever you want it to be. It's kind of a big problem now is that men are judging women that like to be expressed through their nudity, and men think they're sluts. But it's terrible, because why would successful women not be posing nude? I don't understand that. Nudity empowers some people, modesty empowers other people. So it's never a man's thing to judge what empowers a woman. So this toxicity has to be, deleted from the state of mind of people before we can be a better society.
You brought up so many topics. I'm trouble focusing on just one or
Write
two.
them down.
I do. I keep notes here. I've got notes. But I mean, the thing that I first picked up on was you talked about sort of the diversity of stuff. And one thing that I'm have a pet peeve about, which, which to a certain extent is the reason why I sort of bowed out of trying to fight for all these scraps of jobs, is the again, sort of the generalists, like, because these days, when I started doing photo shoots 20 some odd years ago, it was, you go and you do your photos, and then they will also hire a videographer to come and do some videos, and they will hire then a writer to come and write a story. And now people who are trained in photography, people who have an expertise and a mastery of photography, are now expected to not only go and take beautiful photos, but they're also expected to then make a little video essay of it and write captions and stories and whatever else is necessary for this entire, endeavor. And I find that just sort of very disappointing in many ways because I feel like it's creating more what I call generalists. So it's like photographers who also do video, who also write, and basically sort of a jack of all trades of the different aspects, but they're really not masterful at any of them in the way that, traditionally these people have been.
Yeah, I don't think you need to be the master of anything at the moment to get money, because, you being a master is not being gratified financially by anybody anymore, I guess.
That's my feeling, yes.
Yeah, except, very, very narrow, jobs, or very narrow, things that, there's no competition for. In one way, we have to say, fuck it, it is what it is. There's going to be a videographer, photographer, reporter, all in one, and photographers are going to charge very little money, and editors will pay very little for those stories. You pay a monthly subscription, which is super low, and have unlimited access to stock. Why would you even need a photographer? At the end, commercials are being made out of stock footage alone on the television, some TV ads. So, because I'm also a director, I also do that. And, I see now how this has changed as well, how advertising agencies are, cut down to 10% of their financing, as opposed to what was there 20 years ago. If you were in advertising, you would have infinite amounts of money and could do anything. You remember that?
I do. I used to work at a stock photography agency back in the day, and we used to sell single images for tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, for like worldwide campaigns and things like this. But I feel like, again, like sense of mediocrity, and again, like the lowbrow sort of feel of it all, like even stock imagery these days, like as a producer of stock imagery, it's more about volume than it is necessarily about like hitting the right market. Like I feel like stock photography is more like find 1,000 clients to pay $1 rather than find one client to pay $1,000.
Absolutely. There's two big problems there. The volume definitely is the main thing to earn money, the main way. Absolutely, you cannot earn money with good photos anymore because it's flooded. It's crazy. The other thing is you never know how much one image sells for. And then when I get a few cents from a stock photo, because it was a subscription thing, I'm really, really sad at that point, because I could get a few hundred or more a little while ago, but now, it's just pennies. So where's the motivation in that, and then it's a full circle again. You stop being creative. You just do volume, volume, volume. Of course, the quality suffers with volume. And we're back at the first topic that we discussed, it's all a cycle.
Indeed. I mean, you also brought up censorship and that kind of stuff. That thing's another thing that sort of gets me going, because I really hate that basically the world's standards are being set by American puritanical rules, whereas those are not, culturally like appropriate necessarily throughout the world. I mean, obviously there's the female nipple issue throughout the world. Like, because Americans feel uncomfortable with it, therefore everybody else must feel uncomfortable with it. And I really am quite sort of vexed by why we just allow that to happen.
It's a great topic and a great subject to talk. It was like that. There were no nipples on the cover of men's magazines in the States. And there were also no like naked women in fashion magazines in the States. But in Europe, there was like Marie Claire or Vogue, and there was a nude editorial for skincare. And then you'd have every issue of Playboy was a completely naked woman where nobody bothered to have that on their desk, but that
and there were even page 6 girls in Britain where they were like
3,
topless girls, exactly. Or page 3,
page 3 that were like a landmark of, I think, the Sun that started that, and they had celebrities, they had all kinds of girls, just semi nude, but enough to spawn the imagination of horny men.
By Facebook and Instagram standards, inappropriate.
Absolutely. So all the censorship that's going on right now on Instagram is really choking every author that wants to express him or herself a little bit more, in the sense of censorship and threats that after a few, exclusions of maybe a little bit of, shady stuff that according to them is not according to community standards, they will delete your account. And a lot of girls have had their accounts deleted because they were posting some sexy stuff where they wanted to express themselves, more freely and whatnot. And like a sinus wave where there's a change in the aspect of nudity in the society. Back in Yugoslavia, everything was all about nudity. Everything. There were like nude beaches everywhere. Half of people from former Yugoslavia are still nudists. There was like nudity on every possible magazine, on computer magazines, on, science magazines, whatnot. It was a generally accepted thing in movies everywhere. After 30 years, since there's no more Yugoslavia, that has changed enormously. Every country has adopted the American way of Puritanism. And, it's bad now. If you want to go commando, at any point, you're a weirdo. But I guess, from women's liberations, asking and demanding from the society that they accept them as naked as they want to be, if I just oversimplify it, to this closing and, shutting down of body aesthetics, I think it's a logical thing. It comes with the times. The times are dark, and in every dark times, that thing shuts itself down.
Indeed. Let's try and get on to a brighter topic. I feel like we've gone a bit depressing. So you talked about workshops. I love the idea of running workshops, but I'm always like, I sit back and I'm like, okay, but what do I as a creative person have to offer as a workshop topic or anything like that that's somehow different or unique or anything like that? And I find it, so like, how did you come up with the idea of like what to do for a workshop? And for that matter, I mean, have they worked for you? Like, because I'm sure they're not all incredibly successful and all that.
I was a part of a team of Playboy photographers that said, for the first time in history, let us share the knowledge that we got by shooting centerfolds and show them how it is to shoot either with natural light in the field or on location, or with 30 strobes on gobo arms and, super complicated grids and CTO gels in the studio. So this was super amazing because, every photographer from the group was a different kind of material, a different shooter, and had a different style. So each one of us was like very unique. And then we had groups that would alternate from one to the other, or some people wanted to see those super complex strobe, setups in the studio, and others wanted to see, just how you tame the light with a reflector or two, because they didn't want to fiddle with the studio. I was always about natural light and taming the natural light. So that was my field. And we actually showed them how to do it, all of that. And then to top it off, we would actually shoot a pictorial for Playboy at the workshop while they were watching. And then it was published in the magazine so they could see it was a real deal. I think it was quite nice. 7 years was a great time of doing that. But as idea of men's magazines declined, so has this sharing of information for shooting centerfolds. It was a natural, evolution. I've had really amazing time doing it, but now I would not do it anymore.
Fair enough. Something else you brought up earlier too was about how the pandemic has basically affected stuff. So like directly with you and your career and all this, how has the pandemic, because at this point we're almost 2 years into this, how has it sort of affected in different ways, whether it's, opportunities or even sort of having to diversify? Because I've also noticed that you do like drone work now, and you're also a DP and a director and others, and you sort of branched out into different things. So like, has this been sort of an offshoot or a cause and effect because of the pandemic?
It was both bad, because at the beginning we didn't know we had a curfew for 180 days here, and we couldn't work. We had to stay at home. We were in a lockdown. We couldn't actually physically work. It was super depressing, and nobody knew how this is going to be at a later stage. Is it going to get worse or whatever? And a lot of photographers got depressed. A lot of photographers got had to quit. It was, if you entered the lockdowns, the pandemics, like with a healthy company, your own business, you could survive. But if you were already, in debt, or if it was shady for you, or you were having difficulties finding work, then you just quit. A lot of photographers quit. I was lucky to be able to go through the pandemics without much consequence. And it gave me new opportunities to express myself even further. I was droning even before, like 2016. I started shooting drones and flying drones commercially. I started directing at that time as well. It was very good because, when you were fed up with everything, you would go out and you just fly, and then you would make some really nice photos. You would send them to some competitions. I won several gold medals and whatnot from well-known photography societies for my drone work. You have to make everything an opportunity. And so the lockdown and pandemic was also an opportunity for me. I must say, I stayed creative. I did not go into my cocoon and started feeling sorry for myself. I managed to go. I hope we're at the end now. I'll never know how this will age, my sentence, but I'm ready to explode again.
Yeah, there have been a lot of creative people I've talked to who've said that basically like the ability to not feel obligated to do XYZ has actually given them some time and space to sort of reinvent and reinvigorate their own creativity.
Yeah, that's a very good topic as well, because you know a lot of people deal with failure differently. So a lot of people can't cope with failure and deal. They just like, imagine a scientist giving up every time an experiment would not, be a success. The world would have no discoveries at all. And a failure is also a great way, or inability to work, and just having to think and dive into your mind further back, which you cannot do while you were always like working and always having to do with offers, meetings, and editing and whatnot. Failure is a great way to learning new things. I think the biggest problem with people is they set their goals at a certain bar on a ladder. If I use this metaphor, they set a bar on a ladder, and once they reach it, that's it. That's the problem. You don't have to set yourself that bar. You have to climb as high as you can. That is success in the end, because once you reach that bar and just stay in your comfort zone, that is the biggest you know problem, or maybe not a problem, the biggest barrier for your further success.
Well, even that, just the definition of success is a very subjective thing. Because like when I was a kid, my idea of success was a retrospective at the Guggenheim, whereas like now my definition of success would be earning enough money to just be able to afford to do the next project I want to do.
Well, that's amazing that you said that, because a lot of people think about that, and this is what spawns mediocrity. And we're back at stage one, just earning money, to be able to, thrive, and, just be happy and travel a little, but have enough. Not have a lot, but have enough. And you're just going to do as much work as needed for that, and that's it. And it doesn't have to be important how that work will look, because you're going to earn anyway. So this philosophy is, I have that philosophy sometimes as well. I just want to have some money out of this, so but it's a trap.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. When I say enough money, it's a quite large sum of money.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I want to make
Yeah,
big work. I want to make colossal works. I want to, masterpieces. I don't want to just sit around my coffee table and make things for Etsy. I really want to push the bounds of stuff. It is, I mean, maybe I have lowered my standards. That's sort of sad to think, but I hope I haven't. I mean, I still want that retrospective at the Guggenheim, but I'm aware that there are certain career paths that probably I should have taken younger in my career that I didn't. And so therefore I'm sort of not on that path at this moment. Now, hopefully I can sort of divert myself back to that path. That would be magnificent, but so be it at this point. But you also, something about you too is that I've noticed that you have works that you put up for sort of gallery exhibitions. So you have like a fine art series of works that you do in addition to your editorial and your commercial works. Is that correct?
It was a very important part of my career. I just at the start of the pandemics, I had a big exhibition in one of the biggest, culture halls back in my country. But I have been exhibiting worldwide: Mall Gallery London, Seven Gallery New York, Docu Club Tel Aviv, Art Basel Miami, Slovenia Press Photo Award 2 times for the story, a journalist story, and some little places that I liked. Also at the airport, our international airport, I had an exhibition there and whatnot. It's awesome. The exhibition is the ultimate high point in an artist's life, I guess. It's super nice to see. It was crowded when at my last exhibition, even though in February 2020. In March, it exploded, but in February, I had the opening and everybody came, despite of that threat lingering in the air of the new novel coronavirus. So it was amazing. nobody got sick. Nobody back then, of course, it was beautiful. I had the last exhibition was called Goddesses, and was like my shrine to the divine feminine. So every depicted girl on every photo, there were 30 photos, was named after a goddess from all worldwide mythology, like all around the world, from Nordic to, Greek, from Roman to Mesoamerican, as if they descended from their, heavenly places to the gallery. It was awesome. It was really nice. It was my way of giving back for whatever I took from anybody, during my Playboy years, in the spiritual sense of way.
Well, there's this old saying that there was some photographer, I can't remember who said it, which is like he had the choice of going down the path of being a magazine photographer, editorial work, or a fine artist. And he chose to go down the magazine route because he sat back and he said, if I put up an art exhibition, maybe 1,000 people, if he's lucky, might come through during the entire exhibition because it has a physical location and people have to be in that city to see it. Whereas if he goes down magazines, his images could be seen worldwide and it could influence and be seen by millions of people. And I always found that sort of dilemma of like, if you produce something that's in a specific time, place, and all this, you have a limited audience. Whereas if you create something that's intended for sort of the mass consumption, you therefore have a much broader reach and therefore more people engage with your work. And that's always sort of been, plagued the back of my mind.
Absolutely. But I think you have to do both. So, you have to work for magazines and you have to work for, commercial clients, and you have to exhibit in the galleries. And if you're good, if you do what I taught, like, well, if you find your niche and if you're really good technically and like content wise, because content of course is king, then you can sell your limited gallery, pictures from a small gallery anywhere for a big money. So it's like win-win, if you're good. But there's a big problem for artists while exhibiting. Publishing in the magazine is not much. You just send your pictures to the editor. I remember before we used to take our slides, my medium format slides, to the editor with a loop, and then we would check on a light box, and then we would mark and then take them to scan, and have that wet oily scanner, drum scanner scan them. It was a nice process, but very lengthy. Now you just FTP them. With the magazine it's okay, but when you're at an exhibition as an artist, it's very delicate and very intimate, because you show your work on a silver platter to the world, and there's like a lot of criticism, going on, because everybody there is both there to support you and to judge you. So, if you're not ready to be criticized, it can be very, very bad for you. It can be very downing. Hopefully the criticism is constructive and you can take it as constructive and you can benefit from it. But it is a super intimate moment once an artist shows the world his work.
Well, that ability to receive critical feedback is a very difficult balance, because we're all very sensitive artists and we all don't appreciate being overly criticized, but unfortunately it is the nature of the industry to be criticized. And I think part of it is that people who are not in the creative industries are the ones doing the criticism, and they don't sort of necessarily know how to phrase it in some way that can be constructive, versus people just walking up and going like, I don't like it. Like, fuck you. Like that's not helpful. That's not insightful. That's not in any way constructive in a manner.
Yeah, everybody has the right, though. Everybody has the right to love you or hate you. And what I've learned in my experience is like 1/3 of people will love you, 1/3 of people will hate you, and 1/3 of people just don't give a damn.
I think you're being very generous with those numbers, actually. I think it's much smaller. But Do you do prints these days? Because like that's something I've talked to a lot of people about, that the actual nature of making physical prints is kind of going away.
Well, I come from printing, in magazines and, converting my photos to CMYK with the knowledge of how the colors are going to look, what the sum of all those components must be, not to be, overly flooded with color and everything. So
I've got to say, I fucking hate the industry for the fact that there is that issue. Why can't they just make fucking cameras that shoot in CMYK for people that print in CMYK? Like, why does there have to be this RGB CMYK conversion bullshit in the first place? I find that after all these decades of doing this, that nobody has ever come up with a CMYK camera, ridiculous.
Because the CMYK color space is much, much smaller than RGB. That's the problem. And you can't have those saturated reds and saturated blues. The blues are the first ones to fall away, and purples and whatnot in CMYK. But even now, the digital print goes with RGB. So it's actually good that we have all the cameras that shoot RGB.
Okay,
so
then I'll take it the other way. Why haven't printers always been RGB?
Yeah, because it was not invented yet. that was the problem, But the digital printing is not that old. But still, I love the old ways. I love the offset prints and whatnot. And I do a lot of printing of my own stuff. I used to have a dark room in the cellar, but you would lose a whole day developing film and developing those prints. It took too much time. So I do a lot of analog still, not as much as I wanted. I have a lot of analog cameras still. I'm lacking medium format analog because that was my main work thing. And at some point, I was so fed up with film that I couldn't touch it for the better part of 10 years because I was so happy in 2003 when I switched to digital. It was like a new world. It was really shitty digital cameras back then. But, it was good enough for publishing. I was just like, keep that thing away from me. And now as the film is, scarcer and more scarce and more expensive, it's getting a huge revival from the people who love analog and love that feeling, because you still cannot faithfully reproduce the feel of a Portra 400 in digital, for example.
Agreed. I'm a huge fan of analog film.
Yeah, it's awesome. And, now that there's like just a tiny amount of emulsions left from what was available back then. Some of the good ones are still here. It's great to see the interest peaking in film, but it's not great to see the prices going up like crazy. Soon it's going to be like 10 euros for a roll of film, plus development, plus scanning. I do my scanning, but it's quite a lot. It used to be the cheaper version before, but now it's not anymore.
Yes, I know. It's sad, but true. But one thing I was wondering about you is, like, you've been doing lots of work all over the world. You've been traveling a lot. You've been doing all these things, and yet you've chosen to stay in your home country. I'm wondering sort of why you've chosen that.
I was just this. He shows a quarter of an inch, with his fingers, but you cannot see. I was this far from moving to America. At some point, I had all the papers there with the lawyer. I had, for applying for first the visa, of course, then the green card. And I just didn't do it because, I will never know if it was a good decision or a bad decision. I am in my comfort zone here, which is great. I know everybody. Everything is one phone call away. The clients know me, and I know the people from the industry that are around me. But it is a guarantee for you not to grow as a person or as an artist in a country of 2 million people. You cannot, because the market's too small, everything's too small. You can do it online, of course. And that was the other thing that was my prompt not to move. I said, I can do a lot of things over the World Wide Web, market myself and search for new markets via internet. And it was quite okay. It was a success in some ways. I've had my work published in all sorts of international magazines, online magazines as well. But I still think you have to be physically present somewhere to really benefit from, moving to another country. It is not enough to be just online in your own, home behind a computer. I always wanted to have a job where I could work from anywhere in the world, like UX, UI designers or designers in general. I have to be physically present, unfortunately, to make the photograph. I'm not sorry. I guess it's fine.
Yeah, I'm not judging at all. I mean, one of the things that I've realized in my career is that I moved too often. I moved to like 4 different places in the United States, then I moved to the United Arab Emirates, and now I'm in Europe. And the lack of foundation of a network, because I kept changing locations, I feel was detrimental to my growth and my career. And so I was just sort of wondering, like, if basically staying in one place as your hub, your sort of central location, and then sort of branching out, but keeping that foundation in your home country was of a great benefit to you, in contrast to the detriment it was to me.
Yeah, I think everybody would look at it in a different way. Like if you moved a lot, you'd say, well, why didn't I stay based somewhere? And if you didn't move a lot, you'd say, oh, why didn't I move a lot? But I did travel intensely around the world. I've seen the world. I've been to 107 or 108 countries. I've seen the better part of the world. So it's still the most important thing for me. And I tell everybody that you have to see things away from your fireplace to know how the world ticks and how people are, because some people never leave. In America, most people just stay in America. You know how it is.
Oh, I do. I still have people that I grew up with that are still in the same city. And I'm just like, that's so sad. Like they never even got a passport. They never left the country.
Yeah. And us Europeans, we travel a lot and it's accessible. It's easy with cheap flights. You can do it. Sometimes there's no cheap flights to funny destinations, like Afghanistan or Yemen or stuff like that, or Eritrea or places where I've been. But, everything was an awesome journey for me. All the trips, all the travels. And I can't wait to continue when this thing clears up a little bit.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's it, I guess. Hasta pronto.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end of the conversation. We would appreciate it if you would share the podcast with your friends, family, coworkers, studio mates, anyone with an interest in the arts and creative endeavors. The building and strengthening of the arts and creative community is at the core of our mission for this podcast. They can subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are produced by 5014. The audio was edited by Mickey at CushAudio Services, and the music was created by Pete Bybee. Thanks, Pete. The importance and the value of financial support for the arts cannot be overstated. So I would like to express my appreciation for EEA grants from Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway for their support in their effort to work together for a green, competitive, and inclusive Europe. We would also like to thank our partners, Hunt Kastner in the Czech Republic and Kunstsentrene i Norge in Norway. Links to EEA grants and our partner organizations are available in the show notes or on our website, wisefoolpod.com.